Hey guys, alright, we are back with a Unknown 5 video, this time 5 most legendary Vikings and their true stories. Now for those that may not know, I am a Alfred the Great historian, I guess is what you'd label. I study late 800s Anglo-Saxon England, specifically Wessex. So, I know a little bit about the Viking. Not that much because, well, there isn't really many primary sources around them. So, because they did not write things down. It was on the Anglo-Saxons and I guess the Franks, and a little bit, I guess, of the Italians down in the south, Sicilians a little bit, and the Byzantines a little bit that wrote things down. I don't know if the Rus wrote anything down, but yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and just dive right into the 5 most legendary Vikings.
For hundreds of years, the sight of a Viking longship on the horizon would strike terror into the hearts of those in its path, and simply living by the coast became a risky lifestyle due to the ever-present danger of Viking raiders descending on your home to take everything you own, along with your very life. Yet while Vikings are often depicted as bloodthirsty, violent pirates, they were also skilled warriors, craftsmen and explorers who were the first Europeans to discover large parts of the world which had until then been unexplored. The blending of myth and fact which surrounds the Viking era has created legendary characters whose exploits terrified their victims but left a lasting legacy which has shaped the modern world. Here are my choices for 5 of the most legendary Vikings and the true stories behind them. Number 5. Harald Hardrada.
Of course.
Getting his first taste of battle at just 15 years of age, the young Harald Sigurdsson was unlikely to have had any idea of the life of war, conquest and adventure that lay ahead of him, a life which would see him participate in battles across much of the known world, fighting in the service of the mighty Byzantine emperors, winning the Norwegian throne, before ending his life invading the Kingdom of England. His incredible actions and ruthlessness in power earning him the name Harald the Hard Ruler. He found himself in a vicious fight for his life when in 1030 AD, aged just 15, he went to war in support of his half-brother who was attempting to reclaim the Norwegian throne. The attempt failed miserably and Harald was badly wounded in the defeat, his half-brother killed in action. Broken and humiliated, he was forced into exile and fled to Kievan Rus, where he served in the army of the Grand Prince, yet a hunger for wealth and power would eventually draw him to the legendary imperial city of Constantinople.
Hold on. So I haven't watched the last season of Vikings yet, but the character Ivar, based of course a little bit on the real Ivar, but not fucking really because god that show has gone bad. Are they basing Ivar the Bone, like their character of Ivar, a little bit on Harald Hardrada here? Because Ivar in like season 5 or whatever goes to the Rus. He goes to Kiev, I believe. Or, well, he meets with Prince Oleg, the leader of Kiev or some shit. I can't remember the specifics. But yeah, it sounds like a little bit based off of Harald Hardrada. Like they're mixing Ivar the Boneless and Harald Hardrada into one Ivar.
Where he served in the Byzantine Emperor's elite Varangian Guard, which was a prestigious bodyguard unit made up of Viking warriors. He fought with distinction and rose to become the commander of the Guard, and is thought to have seen action all over the Mediterranean and Middle East, even becoming entangled in imperial succession disputes and intrigue. Yet his work for the emperors had made him incredibly rich, wealth which he had wisely been sending back to friends in Kievan Rus for safekeeping, perhaps in the hope that one day the time might be right to return to his homeland. The opportunity finally presented itself in 1046, after the Norwegian throne had passed to his dead half-brother's illegitimate son, Magnus the Good. Using the massive fortune he had accumulated to fund his bid for the crown, Harald returned home. However, perhaps intimidated by his uncle's reputation, Magnus agreed to share power with Harald until he conveniently died just a year later, leaving Harald as the sole ruler of Norway.
How convenient.
Yet one crown was not enough for Harald, and he spent the next 15 years attempting to seize the Danish throne, his constant warring and tendency to mercilessly crush any dissent at home, earning him his new title Harald Hardrada, meaning Harald the Hard Ruler. Despite successes in battle, by 1064 victory had eluded him, and he gave up his claims on the Danish throne. However, just 2 years later he would once again be at war. In January of 1066, the King of England died childless, leading to a succession crisis as several powerful men claimed the throne. Harold Godwinson was crowned King of England shortly after. However, his own brother Tostig, along with Duke William of Normandy and King Harald Hardrada, all maintained their own claims and raised armies to win the throne through war. Tostig Godwinson, brother of the newly chosen English King Harold Godwinson, decided to pledge his allegiance to Harald Hardrada, and so the two joined forces. Harold invaded northern England in September, yet despite scoring some early victories, he was defeated and killed at the Battle of Stamford Bridge by Harold Godwinson's army, but in the process perhaps weakened the King of England just enough that he too would later perish in the famous...
Oh, he definitely weakened him enough to cost him victory over William the Conqueror.
Battle of Hastings at the
That's what
hands
I
of
believe.
William the Conqueror, allowing William to seize the English...
Well, actually, Harold Godwinson, if he had been a little bit more patient, perhaps done some, hindsight's 2020, probably could have pulled off the victory still, even after suffering a pretty costly victory at Stamford Bridge. But, that's not what happened, of course, and William the Conqueror ended up conquering
English throne and changing the course of history forever. Harald Hardrada is said to have died a stereotypically Viking death in the thick of battle, charging forward in a berserk rage, wildly hacking at the foes who surrounded him until he was struck by an arrow to the throat, thus bringing to end not only an extraordinary life, but the life of the man generally considered to be the last great Viking leader. The defeat marking the end of the Age of the Vikings, a warrior culture which had terrorized so much of Europe for so long. Number 4. Rollo. Of the countless thousands of Viking warriors who raided European shores, just a handful are remembered by name today, and even fewer left behind a lasting legacy. Yet Rollo would rise from being just another Viking raider to forging a powerful duchy and establishing a dynasty which would see his descendants become kings, his blood still running through the veins of many of the European monarchs to this day. Little is known about the man's origins, and it's assumed that he was a minor noble in his native land, being born in either Denmark or Norway. In the sagas he is given the byname the Walker, most probably due to his immense size, which made finding a horse strong enough to carry him a difficult task, resulting in him being forced to travel on foot. Yet his imposing size and fierce presence in battle would help him earn the respect of his men and the dread of his enemies. After a mysterious early life, Rollo left Scandinavia to participate in raids on England, Scotland and France, hungry to amass riches and power, yet it was the wealthy city of Paris that would become the focus of his attention. In 885, he participated in the Viking siege of Paris, sailing up the River Seine with a force that contained hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of men. After surrounding the city, tribute was demanded from the trapped Franks. However, despite being massively outnumbered, the Franks refused. The Vikings launched a furious series of attacks on the city that lasted for days. However, despite siege engines being used, the mighty walls of Paris held. Perhaps frustrated by the lack of progress, many of the Vikings abandoned the main force and decided to head further upriver, searching for easier prey. However, Rollo stayed behind with his men to continue the siege for several months more, until he was finally forced to retreat when the Frankish King Charles the Fat arrived with his imperial army.
Forgot that was his nickname.
Yet, after having a taste of the riches France had to offer, Rollo refused to leave and would continue raiding French settlements and towns. The new Frankish king, Charles the Simple, encountered Rollo during another siege. However, despite his name, perhaps he was wise enough to recognize the future threat to his lands that these Northmen presented. Despite defeating Rollo in battle, he was impressed by his leadership as well as the ferocity of the warriors he led, and so decided that Rollo might make for a valuable ally instead of a bitter enemy. The king offered Rollo a great swathe of land to the north of Paris in exchange for ending his raids, swearing fealty to him, and protecting his kingdom against the future Viking raids from his people that were sure to come. Rollo agreed, and his duchy was given the name Normandy, meaning Northman's land. The two
Very
men's agreement
creative.
was sealed by Rollo agreeing to be baptized a Christian and taking the king's daughter as his wife, despite her being perhaps as young as 5 years old at the time.
What?
Rollo would prove to be a successful ruler, cementing control over his new lands and laying the foundations for the Duchy of Normandy to become one of France's most powerful regions. His descendants and subjects would become known as the Normans, a people with a formidable reputation who would eventually conquer much of southern Italy and even parts of North Africa and the Middle East. Yet perhaps his most famous relative would be his great-great-great-grandson, William the Conqueror, who would lead a successful invasion of England in 1066 and become king after victory at the Battle of Hastings. It would be through William that Rollo would become a distant ancestor of virtually all modern European monarchies today, as well as many of the claimants to thrones which have long since been abolished.
I only
Rollo
recognize
finally
like
died
2 of
in
them.
930 AD, and despite having been baptized a Christian, he is said to have died a pagan, with one historian claiming that as he sensed his death was close, he went mad and beheaded 100 Christian prisoners in a final defiant act committed to honor the Viking gods.
I'm just saying, but if it's just only one historian saying it, it's probably not that credible. I mean, one person, especially when it's like about Normandy and especially Rollo, he's one of the most popular Vikings in all of history. There has been plenty of work written about him, and if only one historian is saying that, it's probably not accurate. I'm gonna be honest. Unless he has access to some primary source and information that no one else has looked into, then sure. But if that's not the case, then no. Just no.
Number 3. Erik the Red. Most explorers risk their lives voyaging into the unknown on the promise of obtaining fame and fortune, lured by the thrill of discovering uncharted lands and seeing what no other man has seen before. Yet Erik the Red did not have such lofty ambitions, and was instead left with no other choice but to sail west to the icy and unexplored wilderness of Greenland, as his tendency for murdering those who he had disagreements with led to his presence no longer being tolerated in more civilized society. Killing as a method of conflict resolution seems to have been in his blood. Aged just 10, Erik and his family were banished from their native Norway after, according to the sagas, his father committed what is vaguely described as a number of killings, and they were forced to start a new life in northwestern Iceland. Yet it would not be long until Erik followed in his father's footsteps. While working on the land, a group of Erik's slaves accidentally triggered a landslide on his neighbor's farm, which destroyed the man's house. Enraged at the damage, the neighbor slaughtered the slaves responsible for the damage, yet it seems as though Erik took offense to the man killing people who were deemed to be his property. He retaliated by attacking his neighbor, killing him along with another member of the clan.
Now this is a
rather
spicy
than risk
story.
a blood feud, or perhaps doubting their ability to take the ferocious man down in combat, the kinsman of the dead neighbor took the legal route, demanding that he instead be banished. Erik was forced to flee to a nearby island, leaving some sacred beams of wood he had inherited from his father in the care of a friend. However, when he later returned to collect the prized items, his friend refused to hand them over.
Jerk.
Erik
That's not a
decided
good
to
friend.
take them back by force, and in the resulting fight killed the man's 2 sons.
Dude,
along
Erik
with
just likes to
several other
fight.
men.
Holy shit.
Once again, Erik had been involved in bloodshed, and in 982 AD, the local assembly exiled him from Iceland for a period of 3 years. He was now an outlaw in both his native Norway and his adopted home of Iceland. There seemed to be no place left for him in the civilized world, and so he decided to sail to the mysterious and unexplored lands to the west, which other Norse before him had sailed to, but none had dared settle. He spent his 3-year exile charting the coast of Greenland and scouting the ice-covered landmass for suitable locations for farming and hunting, before finally finding an area in the southwest that seemed relatively ice-free. With his exile over, he returned to Iceland with the intention of gathering more men and ships to establish the first permanent settlement, yet he knew he would need to attract as many people as possible to make the venture a success, and so he conjured up stories of a place
That Viking
called
is shredded,
Greenland,
dude.
which seemed far more appealing than the ice-laden reality. Yet this act of marketing worked, luring hundreds of people to follow him across the sea in 986 AD. Erik the Red ended his days as chieftain of a colony, which would eventually grow to hold 5,000 people, yet a history of murder and the foundation of Greenland's first Norse settlement were not his only legacy. His son Leif Erikson would go on to become widely viewed as the first European to explore North America over 500 years before Columbus embarked on his famous voyage to the New World. Number 2. Ragnar Lothbrok.
Oh, wait, who's going to be more famous than Ragnar
Lothbrok? The legendary
Lothbrok?
Norse hero Ragnar Lothbrok vary from being the son of kings, raider of powerful Christian
I can't think of
kingdoms,
anyone.
husband of famous
Ivar.
shield maidens,
Ivar the Boneless or
looter of
Bjorn
Paris,
Ironside, I guess.
father of famous
Are the
Viking
only two I can
warlords
think of
such as
being more
Ivar the
than
Boneless, and
Ragnar.
even the descendant of Odin, the Norse god of war. Yet are the accounts of
No,
Ragnar
Odin is
based
the
upon the
All-Father.
exploits of a real man, an amalgamation of several different warriors, or just a made-up myth designed to inspire? According to legend, Ragnar was born the son of Sigurd Ring, who was the king of both Sweden and Denmark, and obtained the byname Lothbrok, which means hairy breeches, due to the animal skin trousers he supposedly wore.
Hairy breeches.
Although he is said to have claimed descent from Odin, stories of a ferocious Viking warrior wreaking havoc across 9th century Europe are widespread amongst several different sources, and his name is most closely linked with a series of merciless raids against France and England, which would have made him a wealthy and powerful man. He favoured attacking lightly guarded monasteries, which provided easy but rich pickings, as well as targeting Christians while they were occupied with religious celebrations. Yet he also proved himself to be a formidable warrior and leader, attacking and defeating powerful armies and well-fortified towns, with perhaps his most legendary deed being the capture of Paris in 845. With a fleet of longships he sailed up the River Seine, looting and plundering as he went, before finally reaching the fabled city of Paris, in the beating heart of France. The French king Charles the Bald, grandson of the mighty Charlemagne, was defeated by Ragnar and Paris fell, with the humiliated king forced to hand over an eye-watering 7,000 pounds of silver to Ragnar in exchange for leaving. Yet, despite amassing such unbelievable levels of wealth, Ragnar's raids against European shorelines continued, earning him powerful enemies.
Man's a legend.
Eventually,
you like
his
money,
luck
you
would
gotta
run
keep
out,
going.
and after being shipwrecked on the English coast during a storm, he was captured in Northumbria by King Aelle and executed in a manner which sealed his legendary status. Furious at the raids Ragnar had carried out in his lands, King Aelle dreamt up the most painful and humiliating death he could think of, punishing the upstart Viking by having him thrown into a pit of vipers, the fall breaking his bones and leaving him to be slowly bitten and poisoned to death by the vicious snakes. According to the Icelandic legends, Ragnar faced death with pride, pleased that he would soon be entering the gates of Valhalla, before issuing a final prophetic warning of the fate that awaited King Aelle and England when the news of his death reached his sons. How the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffered, confidently predicting the bloody vengeance his sons would visit upon Aelle and the kingdoms of England. It's through his sons that Ragnar's legacy would continue, fathering many men who became famous warriors in their own right, including Bjorn Ironside, who would explore and raid the Mediterranean, and the feared Ivar the Boneless, who along with his brothers would lead the great heathen army across the North Sea to avenge Ragnar, conquering large sections of England and establishing the Danelaw, a portion of northern England that was governed by the laws of the Danes and would be settled by large numbers of Vikings. Whether Ragnar was a real man, a merging of multiple characters, or simply a myth, his name still echoes through the ages, having become a hero amongst his own people, but a devil amongst those whose suffering he caused. Number 1. Ivar the Boneless. An intriguing mixture of mystery and incredible brutality makes Ivar the Boneless perhaps the most famous Viking of all time, with the man himself becoming legendary for his cunning and cruelty. His conquests would spread fear, terror, and...
In English history, Ivar is certainly very famous. But I think outside of English history, not really. I'd say Bjorn would probably be more popular outside of England than Ivar would be, because Bjorn explored the Mediterranean, as they
across
said
the
earlier.
British Isles as he executed a bloody plan of revenge that would see entire swathes of the country fall under his control, countless thousands perish in battle, and even great kings mercilessly put to incredibly savage deaths at his hands. There are several theories regarding how Ivar obtained his famous nickname, with the most popular being that he suffered from some form of bone disease that made him prone to breaks and fractures, leaving him unable to walk. However, the name could have been given to him because of his flexibility in combat, or simply because he was impotent. There have even been theories that the name could have been a mistranslation from Ivar the Despicable to Boneless, as the two words in Latin are very similar.
I've heard
Yet,
that
if he
one.
did suffer from some kind of disability, it did not prevent him from becoming an intimidating warrior who inspired the army under his command to achieve great victories. In 865, Ivar and his
Hold on,
brothers...
I just got it. I have to rant about the Vikings' portrayal of Ivar the Boneless here. Now, I don't mind that they made him like, literally like boneless, like a cripple. However, what I do mind is that when they introduced him, they showed him being able to hold his own against his brothers that could fight on their feet. But then the last couple seasons of Ivar, he seems pathetic. He doesn't seem like a fucking warrior, and that's what disappoints me. Maybe that changes in this last season that I still have yet to watch. But yeah, I just had to say that. I just had to get it off my chest.
As the Great Heathen Army, an unprecedented gathering of Viking warriors from all over Scandinavia, which possibly numbered in the tens of thousands. According to legend, the army was put together to exact revenge on the English king of Northumbria, who supposedly executed Ivar's father, the famous Ragnar Lothbrok, by having him thrown into a pit of snakes. However, whether or not this is true is unknown. At this time, Northumbria was embroiled in a civil war, a conflict which Ivar and the Norse would have been well aware of, and so it's possible that the invasion of England was carried out to simply take advantage of this weakness. Yet the sheer size and scale of the invasion does suggest that it was motivated by personal reasons rather than just a desire for land and wealth. Regardless of its intention, the most destructive and violent invasion of England had begun. Ivar's army quickly captured the Northumbrian capital of York, defeated the English army, and captured King Aelle, the man who was responsible for his father's death. For such a crime against his family, only the most gruesome and painful revenge would do, and Ivar is thought to have had Aelle killed using the Blood Eagle, a terrifying Viking method of execution, which involved cutting the victim's back open, breaking the rib bones one by one with an axe, before pulling out the lungs to form a gory wing-like shape draped across the back. Some sources even suggest that at this point the victim might still be alive and would be forced to endure the unbelievable agony of having salt rubbed into the giant open wound before they finally died.
I didn't know about the salt.
Whether or not this is true remains debated, but what is known is that Ivar carved a bloody path across England, displaying not only a genius-like understanding of battle tactics and strategy, but also a disturbingly brutal streak in the treatment of his enemies, perhaps using such excessive cruelty as an extension of his battle strategy, the fear accompanying his name often forcing potential enemies to surrender without a fight. In one such example of this excessive level of violence, after taking the kingdom of East Anglia, the former King Edmund was beaten with clubs, tied to a tree, and shot full of arrows, before being beheaded and having his lifeless head thrown unceremoniously into a nearby ditch, all because he refused to become a vassal and renounce his faith. The conquests and raids carried out by Ivar continued all over England, Ireland, and Scotland, where monasteries and towns were destroyed, civilians slaughtered, and settlements pillaged on an unbelievable scale, with the vast amounts of plunder and slaves taken making their way back to Ivar's base of operations in Dublin, making him extraordinarily rich in the process. The circumstances of Ivar's death are disputed, but it's thought that he lived to a surprisingly old age before finally succumbing to a non-violent death, unlike the thousands of unfortunate people who died horribly as a result of a disease in York. The people of the British Isles breathing a collective sigh of relief as Ivar the Boneless finally passed from this world. So those are my choices for 5 of the most legendary Vikings.
I agree with these choices, even though I personally prefer, as I've said before, Bjorn to Ivar the Boneless. Maybe, do number 3 be Ragnar, number 2 be Ivar, and then number 1 be Bjorn. That would be fine with me. That would probably be my list, maybe. I don't know. I really like Ragnar. I really like the concept of Ragnar, even if he was not real. So I might have put him at number 1 on my list. But, it wouldn't have been much of a true story then. But god damn it, I love Ragnar. Yeah, a good list. They didn't really say anything that was wrong in history, you know. They don't really do that on Unknown5. I have yet to really encounter that. He definitely does not really deep dives into history, so of course, you know, he's got to be pretty brief and broad in his explanations. And you know what? I think he did a good job. So you guys have a suggestion for what you want to see me react to next? Remember to leave that down in the comment section below. And remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.